Here in the tropics of Horsham, Angus White has set up a nursery, architectural plants, specialising in exotics. Spiky yuccas and agaves, cordylines and palms. Form, not flower, is what interests him. Angus is one of the leaders of a movement called the New Exoticists. Their aim? To persuade us to experiment with growing these plants outside. How are you different from the old exoticists?
I'm not sure that we are different, except that we have more plants available to us. It was the Victorians were the ones who were crazy about these sort of plants, and something happened. I don't know, maybe it was the First World War, but something happened whereby a lot of the plants that we are using became unfashionable. We're trying to make them become fashionable again because we love them. And
you're also trying to grow them outside, whereas they grew a lot of these things inside.
Yeah, they did, but they also grew quite a lot outside. But we do have many more plants available to us now that they didn't, or they did, but they didn't realise they did. I mean, I think the story about it being discovered during the First World War in a bombed-out greenhouse that camellias, after all, were in fact hardy, whereas prior to that they thought that they weren't. There's been a lot of cases like that. The Trachycarpus palms, the Chuzan palms, when they were first introduced from China, nobody considered that they could possibly be hardy because everyone knew that England is a cold country and obviously you can't grow palm trees here.
What do you think is the best place to use these sort of plants?
We can use these plants to create something exotic to a greater or lesser extent, virtually anywhere in the country. But I must admit I have a particular interest in creating exotic gardens in small gardens in very built-up areas, and particularly London, because there you have this so-called heat island effect, where you get hotter summers and you get much milder winters. And I know that there are things that you can grow in central London that we can't even dream of thinking of growing down here at all. But the sort of illusion that you can create in a small courtyard, really well-sheltered garden in the middle of a town is much greater than you can in a large country garden.
Acclimatising themselves to the chilly Sussex air are Cordyline australis, yuccas and Camarops humilis. These big magnolias and loquats have been shipped in from Italy. They're having to learn in a hurry how to cope with life in the home counties. In the greenhouse, plants can still pretend they're in the Mediterranean, like these agaves, though they're hardly newcomers to the English gardening scene.
Oh, they've been used for ages. I mean, there's nothing new exoticist about using agaves at all. They're a good sort of English traditional plant in a funny sort of way. You'll find them in a lot of large, very traditional gardens.
What's the proper name for these variegated agaves?
Agave americana variegata.
And are they any more difficult to grow, or are they any more tender than the plain ones?
Yes, they are much tenderer. The non-variegated forms, we even have one here growing in Horsham, which has survived -17, absolutely fine. They seem to be quite hardy when they're big. Not all species are, but the variegated ones, no, they're not nearly as hardy. And I know that in January '87, a very cold winter down in Torquay, where these have been growing for years, they were really badly damaged.
These tightly curled croziers are the new young leaves of a fern. It's called Blechnum chilense, an interesting plant, and it's hardy.
Yes, perfectly hardy. If it's, there aren't that many really good hardy evergreen ferns that we can grow in this country, not in this part of the world. If you go down to the sort of Atlantic seaboard gardens, there are more. You can grow the big tree ferns and things like that. But the best ones I've seen in this part of the world is at the Savile Gardens in
what sort of
Windsor.
conditions do they like?
Damp, fairly shady, but nothing. They're not particularly demanding. They're just an interesting thing. And they don't do very well in pots. They're much better in the ground.
This cordyline, Cordyline indivisa, is Angus White's favourite in the family. This one's only a baby, but given the right treatment and some fair weather, it'll grow into a monster with leaves 7 feet long. It's slightly hardier than the better-known Cordyline australis. Even so, it still needs a little winter protection.
You can leave it if it's in a mild place, but if you have a really cold spell with all the cordlines or any plant that's shaped like this, it's terribly easy just to go around very quickly when you've heard the weather forecast and it's going to get extremely cold, just tie it up with a piece of string like that, because it's protecting the meristem, which is the growing point in there. And it'll often make the difference between life and death with these things. But this needs to be planted in a sunny place, but preferably in the shade of a deciduous tree, so that it gets lots of sun during the winter, but slight shade in the summer, because it doesn't like the heat in the summer.
Yeah.
So in a way it's more of a problem to grow than Cordyline australis, but it's a much more exciting plant and it's well worth it.
Do you think you have to be a bit of a gambler, though, to do your sort of garden?
Yes.
So you can have a sort of mad drunken ride on all these extraordinary exotics, and then if you lose them, start again?
No, sometimes when I describe to people the sort of plants that I like, they will respond by saying, oh yes, I'm into half-hardy plants as well. Well, I'm not into I don't want things to die. What I'm saying is that you can create a really extraordinary, exciting, spiky, exotic, sort of jungly garden, but using hardy plants, with a basic structure of very hardy plants, which are going to be absolutely reliable.